behind me, you can see what looks like just a regular old road. And you might be thinking, I'm standing in the middle of it and I'll be run over. I won't be, because for the next 3/4 of a mile, this stretch of the former A93 is completely abandoned. If I come along here, and we turn round, you can see that there's a gate stopping any traffic from getting at me. So what you can see ahead though is a large retaining wall. Now the current A93 has to climb quite steeply to avoid Craighall Gorge, so the current A93 climbs up the side, and that's why that retaining wall is there, because there wasn't enough space to fit the new road in next to the old road. Straight ahead of me there is where the road enters the trees, and as you can see it's already beginning to become rather overgrown, showing that traffic hasn't come down here in quite a while. In fact, the road itself closed in 2008 when the new road was opened to bypass this section. So I first started coming down here in 2010, and in the 4 years that I've been coming here to have a look at this abandoned stretch of road, it's become a lot more overgrown. The forest is slowly taking over. One of the main reasons for moving the A93 slightly further up the hill was because the road had a tendency to fall further into the Craighall Gorge. Like I say, it's quite steeply sided, and since the road's closure, this actually happened at some point between 2012 and 2013, this part of the road started to collapse. You see, not much of it has gone yet, but it's cracking up significantly but slowly, and I imagine eventually it'll slowly eat its way across the road and there'll be a massive gap here. Looking at the gap from this side, you get a real impression of how much of a drop there is when it comes to going into the Craighall Gorge. As you can see from the way the crash barriers have been built, they've been sunk so far into the ground just to be able to reach them at a height that'll be slightly above road level. Right behind me there is the Bailey Bridge, the most recognisable feature of the A93 as you leave Blairgowrie. Now a lot of people will probably recognise this structure because it was quite iconic on the drive north. So you might be wondering what the story is behind this Bailey Bridge. Now in 1985, some torrential rain came down and washed loads of the road away, sent it right down into the gorge below, leaving this massive gap. So it took 2 weeks to put up this Bailey Bridge, which was only meant to be a temporary solution. It was traffic light controlled because it's quite narrow, but this temporary solution managed to last until 2008, when the new road was eventually built just above us. You can't hear it anymore, you can further down, but it's now quite far above us. And I actually have fond memories of this road. I always enjoyed coming over here when I was younger, because it's quite iconic. It makes a great noise when you actually drive over this, although you can't anymore because it's blocked off by stone blocks at each end. And I just really like this bridge. Always have done, always will do, and I never thought I'd be able to do this as an abandoned explorer. Now I'm standing on the side of the Bailey Bridge, and below me you can see the old retaining wall, which has collapsed in a few places. Not at this point though, but it has done. You can see where the road would have been, and we are now suspended above it in this structure. So this is the underside of the Bailey Bridge. Now when I was younger I used to think this went over some massive ravine and it was something really impressive, because you always got that impression from the woodland when you were coming through, because it was dark, you couldn't quite see what was around you. You're normally following trucks across this thing and it was traffic light controlled. But no, as it turns out it just goes over a bit of collapsed road, which I found a bit shocking when I first came here, because I was just expecting to come down here and see a big ravine, maybe a waterfall or something, but there's nothing on the underside apart from some crumbly old tarmac. Now when you get to the other side of the Bailey Bridge, the woodland opens up a wee bit and you get to see some road features that are still remaining, like those reflector poles over there. And if I move the camera around, you can see the old slow point, and if I zoom in a wee bit for you here, you can see where the old stop line was. That's where traffic would have queued to enter the bridge. There was once traffic lights there, although they've long since been removed. Now I've mostly just been focusing on what's on top of the road and what you can see from the road, but if you take the plunge and go beneath, there is this brilliant culvert which you can see just through there. Here we go, we're at the culvert. It's quite a large and impressive structure. I believe this road was mostly upgraded in the 1930s, which is when this section of road would have been built. Have a look inside. And you can see it quickly becomes a much smaller structure once you get in. So yeah, I'd say that was the original height, and then when the 1930s road was built, it would have been extended ever so slightly. You can see a concrete shelf at the top there. But yeah, think about it, there must be hundreds of these under the roads throughout the UK, probably thousands. And people just drive over them, walk past them, everything else, and they never know they're down here. But if you take that extra effort just to have a wee look, you might be surprised at what you find just beneath your feet. Now, still walking up the road, it goes on for a wee bit longer after you leave the Bailey Bridge. And you can see just how much the foliage and grass and everything else is slowly creeping in. So now it's just left a small track down the middle, with the white line still sticking through. So you could probably just about get a car down here if you're able to get it through the lock gates. Something I find quite amusing about this is if you were just to clear away some of the detritus that has fallen onto the road, trim back some of these tree branches, you could open this today and it would still be in a far better condition than most of the roads in Fife, because Fife Council are really shit at maintaining their roads. As you can see ahead, some blight has finally managed to penetrate the tree cover, which means the road is slowly covering its way out of the gorge and we're near the end of the abandoned stretch. So just as the road begins to turn out of the gorge, there's a small path that goes into the woods. Now if you follow that path, you get a really good view of the massive cliff that makes up the side of the Craighall Gorge. And below there, the river is at the bottom of it as well. So that is pretty much the end of the road. Beyond here, the A93 would have continued towards the Bridge of Cally, Glenshee, and then up into Braemar and eventually across to Aberdeen. So it's quite a long run and it's now been bypassed by a rather boring modern stretch of road. But this section of road will always hold memories for me and anybody else that drove it before it was finally bypassed in 2008.